Welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné, and these are the top stories from across the continent. A French aid worker is killed by a drone strike in Goma in eastern DRC. The government says an investigation is now underway. The AFC M23 rebels blame the Congolese army. From boom to bust, global cocoa prices plunged after 2024's record highs, forcing producers to cut payments to farmers. So what does that mean for sustainable cocoa production? Our guest breaks it down. And after nearly 170 years, leopards are returning to South Africa's western coast, a real conservation success. But with fewer than 1,000 Cape leopards left in the wild, the species remains dangerously vulnerable. We start in the eastern DR Congo. A French aid worker for the UN Children's Agency has been killed in an airstrike in the city of Goma, controlled by the M23 militia. The Congolese government says that the circumstances of the incident is now under investigation. Despite a peace deal signed last December in Washington, clashes between the M23 and Congolese army have continued. Emma Livingston in Kinshasa has more.
Early in the morning on Wednesday, an attack drone fired on a house in an upscale area of Goma, a city in eastern Congo occupied by M23 rebels. A French woman working for UNICEF, the UN Children's Agency, was among at least 3 people killed, according to the UN. For now, it's not possible to say with absolute certainty who conducted the strike, but the M23 has blamed Congolese government forces. Over the past few weeks, the rebels have repeatedly criticized drone strikes targeting their positions. And 2 weeks ago, Congolese forces killed a senior rebel leader in a drone strike close to Goma, according to several security sources. The UN worker killed on Wednesday was almost certainly not the intended target. M23 leaders asserted afterwards that former Congolese President Joseph Kabila, who's close to the rebels and who's been in and out of Goma, was among the real targets, alongside some of the top rebel commanders. Humanitarian operations in Goma will now probably be affected. World leaders condemned the drone strike, and many, including French President Emmanuel Macron, have called for international humanitarian law to be respected.
A major shock is hitting the cocoa industry. After soaring to record levels in 2024, global cocoa prices have dropped sharply, forcing governments in West Africa to adjust. In Ivory Coast, the world's largest cocoa producer, authorities have reduced the price paid to farmers to nearly 60%, raising serious concerns about the livelihoods of millions of farmers across West Africa. Neighboring Ghana, the second largest producer, has also cut the price paid to its farmers. And beyond the market shock, the crisis is raising deeper questions about sustainability, farmer income, and the future of cocoa production in Africa. So to discuss this, we're joined by J40 Prince Will Ghana, a sustainable agriculture specialist, joining us from the town of Tiko in Cameroon. Welcome, J40. So let's talk about Cameroon. At one point, cocoa farm gate prices were among the highest in West Africa. So has Cameroon also been impacted by falling international prices and a global oversupply?
Yes, thank you for having me. Cameroon has been hit the most. We've been hit the most. Our prices are lower than any other country. I think right now we are selling at about $2 per kilogram. That's $2 a kilogram. The price has dropped from $12,000 to about $3,060 per metric ton. So the situation is really, really bad right now.
And so your expertise is sustainability. So that means millions of smallholders, farmers depend on cocoa in West Africa. So what happens to sustainable farming efforts when prices fall so sharply?
It's very bad because at the situation we find ourselves in right now, most cocoa farmers cannot follow the agronomical norms. Again, some of them now, they are looking for cheap chemicals to spray, killing important microorganisms. Some of them now, they are now trying to see how they can look at other cheaper means, to produce, and it's affecting the environment massively. Some are now cutting down the trees and they want to engage into crops that are not advisable, some crops that are even more detrimental to the soil. It's really bad what is going on right now.
So what does it mean? Could this situation push farmers to switch crops to survive, abandoning cocoa production altogether?
Yes, an incident occurred in a place country where a farmer came with a group of guys and they were cutting down the entire cocoa farm. And this is not just an isolated incident. There are so many of them that have been documented in so many areas in Cameroon where farmers are doing that. I think many of them are really worried. They are tired. They can't feed their homes, their families. It's a very bad situation. And some of them, I think probably in a few months, if the prices don't do well, if they don't go up, I think many of them will cut down their plants and probably move to other crops, maybe food crops that are more profitable and crops that they can even consume. If they could consume cocoa, I'm sure they will consume cocoa.
And in order to understand the situation, can you explain to us how prices are determined?
Yeah, the prices are determined basically by the forces of demand and supply, that's in the world market, and also by the exporters. For instance, in Cameroon right now, we have the main exporter, who is Delca. So they come together with the Cameroon Cocoa and Coffee Board, and they decide and say, okay, this is the world price right now, is at this level. So the local level, how do we now buy from them to ensure that the farmer gets something, the exporter gets something, and they look at the shipping, the freight weights, they look at the quality of the cocoa. So there are a lot of things that are taken into consideration before determining the price of cocoa. And in our situation, it's an open market system. So since the world market, the price have dropped drastically, Cameroon is even in a worse situation compared to other countries like Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire.
And Cameroon was, until at least recently, the world's 5th largest cocoa producer, and with a goal to triple production by 2030. So do you think that low price will have an impact for this ambition, including in terms of investments?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Last year, we saw a lot of people engaged in the production of cocoa. I had to call so many clients, farmers who call me, they want to do cocoa because they were so excited. Some of them built houses. But with the current prices now, they are now aware that they are probably gambling. They are gambling because they don't know if the prices are going to go up next year or they will drop on all of that. So it's now a gamble. And I think many of them were even more interested in growing cocoa so they could meet the 2030 vision to be able to double the production of cocoa from 300,000 tons, metric tons annually. I think they are now worried. They are now worried, and I think many might not really engage.
So we were talking about overstocking. There's also other factors. So do you see, for example, climate change and sustainability challenges making cocoa production even more vulnerable in the future?
Of course. The El Nino effect is still going on. The excessive, the unpredictable rainfall, the climate change, and a lot of things are still going on. So these things might either affect the price positively or negatively. For instance, the prices could go up, based on what happened in Ghana, where the cocoa production dropped drastically because of the El Nino effect and climate change. The same issue occurred in Cote d'Ivoire, and that's why we had the unprecedented increase in price in 2024. So the same situation might occur, but we don't know if it's going to affect farmers positively or negatively, maybe in terms of pricing.
Thank you very much, J40 Prince Wilgana, a sustainable agriculture specialist, joining us from Tico in Cameroon. Thank you very much for your analysis. Now, the new U.S. ambassador to South Africa has been summoned by the government in Pretoria after sharply criticizing some of the country's policies. Ambassador Leo Brand Bosel III, who only took up his post last month, questioned South Africa's diplomatic ties with Iran and its affirmative action laws designed to expand opportunities for Black South Africans. His remarks come amid growing tensions between Washington and Pretoria. Donald Trump has repeatedly accused South Africa's government of discrimination against white citizens. And meanwhile, soldiers were deployed to the streets of Johannesburg in an effort to help police fight gang violence and illegal mining. It was the first major deployment since President Ramaphosa said in his speech to the nation last month that he would use the army against organized crime, which he called the greatest threat to democracy and the country's economic development. Laurent Bestecher has more.
Dozens of armored vehicles transporting heavily armed soldiers rolled into Johannesburg's crime-ridden Riviera neighborhood. Looking on from a distance, residents expressed hope the deployment would help tackle organized crime and put an end to rampant gang violence.
Now, it's gonna be, they'll be calm. I think they will be aware now that the soldiers are here, so the drugs will stop a bit, the shooting will stop.
The military deployment was announced last month by President Cyril Ramaphosa, who described organized crime as one of the biggest threats facing South Africa. Last year, the country reported around 60 murders a day on average, largely linked to turf battles between rival gangs. On Wednesday, soldiers backed by police conducted house-to-house searches in front of the cameras. Yet while their presence seemed to reassure locals, some remained skeptical over the long-term effects of the deployment and whether it would amount to more than a simple show of force.
How long are they going to be trying to come and trying to protect our communities? Because the moment they leave, it's back to normal.
There's too many deaths in this community. So and I hope and I pray that it's just not for today, that it must be a constant thing that the military is here.
Others also questioned whether the army could effectively tackle the root causes of crime, especially unemployment, which affects around 32% of South Africa's population.
And let's stay in South Africa now to the Western Cape Mountains. The return of a top predator is giving conservationists hope after 170 years. But with fewer than 1,000 Cape leopards left in the wild, the species remains dangerously vulnerable.
In the Cape Province, this researcher checks 23 camera traps which show that over the past 2 years, the leopard population is on the rise.
So yeah, we're going to extract the SD card and check on the computer what are those 141 images. It is, thousands of photos and videos to go through, and then it gives us a really clear idea how the leopard is interacting with the landscape compared to food availability, compared to vegetation, compared to human or roads.
The Cape leopard, smaller than its savanna cousin, had nearly disappeared from the region 170 years ago. Now the predator is returning. This NGO rescues leopards caught in traps set by farmers to protect their livestock. So far, nearly 100 animals have been saved. Rescue efforts allow a chance to carry out genetic tests and fit a GPS collar to track leopard families. The research program was launched by a former doctor who set out to answer one question: where did these leopards come from?
They were unable to wipe them out in the higher mountains of the Western Cape, and we believe that they've recolonized from there. In fact, we were extremely worried about genetic inbreeding because they survived in the end from a very small population.
For these conservationists, the next challenge is educating communities to help protect this endangered predator. Children are a key part of conservation. Kaya the leopard has become the mascot of the Cape's national parks.
We also tell them that, if we as human beings either would destroy or not look after our environments, then eventually it will impact on the leopards being the top predator that we find within this biome.
Today, fewer than 1,000 leopards are believed to remain in the mountains of the Cape, still a fragile population for the long-term survival of the species.
The Cape's beautiful mountains there to conclude this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.